G'day chicos locos, and welcome once again to this week's property news in review. But first, let me tell you something. Uppercut Adams rang me last night and he told me that he's going to jail. My news for you, Uppercut Adams, is start training, prepare yourself, because they like pretty boys in jail. Now, if you're planning on taking Obi-Wan Martin to jail with you, well, I'd say that he better start training as well. So Uppercut, if you are going to be going against the new proposed legislation with regard to cash transactions over $10,000, here's a tip for you. You better start watching a movie called Get Hard. It's going to prepare you for what you're going to encounter in jail. Now for fake news, chicos locos, what we're going to be looking at is CoreLogic's hedonic home value index. In other words, what the mainstream media are relying on to tell you that property prices are on the rise. Quite frankly, with all and what the government have thrown at the property market, including the kitchen sink, and as I said, very soon they're going to be sacrificing their firstborn in order to keep this property bubble moving along. We have had, wait for it, a 0.1% rise across Australia in property values for the month of July. Happy days, woo-hoo-hoo. In reality, and as personal advice, as friendly advice, I would like you to consider the following before you make a decision in putting a noose around your neck, or the Latin word for mortgage, meaning a death pledge. That's what a mortgage actually means, a death pledge. So before you put this death pledge around your neck, consider the following. Have a close look and pay close attention to what the chief economist from JP Morgan, Sally Auld, has to say in this following clip.
Australians are struggling to pay back their mortgage. The latest data shows the rate of mortgage arrears has been growing for the past 5 years. It's a worrying trend that points to bigger problems in the economy.
Typically you'll find that arrears rates rise when economic conditions weaken. The fact that arrears rates are going up probably does speak to a persistently low incomes growth environment. So, overall incomes growth in the economy is running at about half of long run averages. Mortgage holders in general are now using a greater proportion of their income to pay back the mortgage.
Economist Sally Auld predicts the rate of mortgage arrears, which is when borrowers fall behind on their repayments by more than a month, is only going to get worse.
It's not our view that over the next 6 to 12 months the labour market's going to get a whole lot better. It's not really our view that incomes growth is going to pick up a whole lot. So I think what that tells you is this trend increase in arrears rates is probably likely to continue over the next 6 to 12 months.
It's my turn.
Now that you've seen it, did you pay close attention to what she believes is going to happen? Very low chance of a wage rise, a very high possibility on continual mortgage vagrancies, and all due to the high possibility, once again, of very high unemployment rates. What's just happened with the construction industry is about to take place in the retail and in the hospitality industry. Thousands of people are going to be unemployed. And if you just bought yourself a death pledge that's going to last you 30, 40 years, all on this hedonic home value price index and the 0.1% rise allegedly, which I question as to the data that they put this thing together with, I'm going to show you where they extract this data and the projected values of property that is currently advertised on Domain and Real Estate as to what the predictive so-called hedonic index tells you that the property is worth. We are miles apart, people. So put your tequila away, because it's not party time. It's time to be vigilant. So in summary, people, what we've got is we've got the lowest ever interest rates. We've got a loosening of APRA policies. We got the banks so-called willing to lend more money. But we've also got very low listing numbers. And yet, this hedonic home value price index only shows 0.1% rise for July post election time, post the so-called confidence, post throwing the kitchen sink at this market. Again, in Latin, mortgage means death pledge. And if you jump in too early, too quick, too soon, you're going to have one for the next 30 to 40 years. Watch this space. Just saying. Raylan. Some background, as I've shared on Twitter and as I've shared in my social media accounts, there is a lot more behind this story. One, I posted that the 500 that the mainstream media were talking about, the 500 million that the mainstream media were talking about with regard to debt was actually unsecured creditors. Westpac, as I understand it, are in for another $500 to $600 million. There's also a secured creditor for $36 million that is based in Melbourne. They have 3,000 apartments in or under construction in the pipeline. What I estimate from all this is that there are 2,000 to 3,500 families directly impacted from what's just happened with Raylan, with going into voluntary administration. Without going into too much detail as to the voluntary administration, but looking more as to the aftermath of what just happened, I'd like you to pay close attention, chicos locos, because this is very, very important. One, the questions that need to be asked is, what builder is going to buy or even put their name to unfinished projects that are currently under construction? Particularly when you look at all the fiasco that's been going on with private certification. There's going to be two types of builders that'll look at this, and they come under the categories of Buckleys and none. With the appointment of the new building minister or commissioner, any new project is going to come under closer scrutiny than what it's ever been before or over the last 10 years, 10, 15 years. So if a builder takes on a project, they're going to have to warrant the foundation work and anything else that's already been erected prior to them coming on board as the new builder, the new developer, and to finish this project. So there's going to be huge problems ahead for people that have bought off the plan and that have invested their money in these developments. They are going to be white elephants all over Queensland, New South Wales, and probably even Victoria. The other issue that we have and that we've been talking about is the release of deposits. Again, you heard me say 6 months, 8 months ago with this whole fiasco with Opal Tower that the recourse that tenants as well as owners or purchasers in these developments had is not with the developer, is not with the builder, because they've gone broke. They've already parked their money elsewhere. They're gone. It's a waste of money. It's a waste of time. The recourse in the case of Opal Tower, I said all along, was with pursuing the New South Wales state government, as they were joint venture developers with the developer in Opal Tower. And what do you know? Reports this week have come out that a group are taking on the New South Wales state government for compensation with regard to the Opal Tower fiasco. So on that, I'd like to tell you this with regard to Raylan and all the people that have released the deposits to the developer after signing a purchase, an off-the-plan purchase. In other words, the 10% deposits. Your recourse, and pay close attention, your recourse is with the real estate agent and or the solicitor that conveyed the contract of sale. You're going to find that most of the sales that took place with this development company were done through one agency or marketing company, and the contracts were conveyed through one firm of conveyancers or solicitors. That's where your recourse is. Because let me tell you, as an unsecured creditor, you've got Buckleys and no chance of recouping or recovering your 10% deposit. The only chance that you may have is if a builder or a developer completes the project and you're entitled by way of the exchange contract of sale to settle on that particular unit. But do you really want to? So once again, people, be very careful and be very vigilant when you're buying something off the plan. There's a lot more at risk and there's a lot more at stake, particularly when there is a huge amount of oversupply. I don't particularly care what the mainstream media tell us with regard to the fact that we're going to run out of supply in the next 1 or 2 years. Let me tell you that I believe, based on the numbers that I've done across all of Australia, across the capital cities predominantly, in the major hubs, residential hubs that have been created, we have enough supply of apartments to last us for the next 5 to 7 years. But then again, do you really want to live in them? Do you really want to own them? And do you want to be a tenant in one of them? I'm just saying. So I briefly mentioned about Opal Tower and how I said 6-8 months ago that the recourse that the Opal Tower owners had was to follow and pursue the New South Wales State Government with all the background information that I had with regard to Opal Tower, how it was built, and now that following through. But the owners not only have filed a claim against the New South Wales Government, a court case against the New South Wales Government, but now, chicos locos, it's party time because we have a hero in our midst. Apparently, the builder of Opal Tower, as I read in the newspaper yesterday, has decided to buy one of the units in the complex. And it's alleged that they need this unit in order to access and fix the problems and the issues with level 10. I'm going to share with you something as to what used to happen in the early 2000s when a similar thing happened with the industry with regard to apartments being devalued and when the market turned 2004, 2005. Developers, property owners, builders were reselling apartments in the projects in order to establish or re-establish confidence in that particular market, in that particular complex with the valuers. In other words, they were wanting to create what we called arm's length transactions with new purchasers in order to re-establish values in that particular building, so up and coming settlements would actually proceed, values would be confident to put their name, to put the license down on a valuation report to be produced to the bank. Well, is it going to work in this case? I don't know. I'm not saying that this was the motivation behind what the builder did. All I can say and report is that what we've been told in the mainstream, and that is that the builder's done this because he wanted access to this particular apartment in order to carry out the rectification work in level 10. Let's take it at that. Now, muchachos, we're going to talk about Australia's newest retirement village, and that's Newcastle. I say that tongue in cheek. However, I do say that because all I noticed whilst I spent some time there in Newcastle was a lot of residential construction. Retail, commercial space for lease everywhere. But I guess the bustling industry of Newcastle were coffee shops, $2 boutique stores, ladies apparel, and massage parlours. Other than that, I didn't really see much more happening there. We took a drive through the main street, Hunter Street of Newcastle. What was once a bustling town, a bustling centre, is now a dead zone, a dead man zone, a zombie zone. What was once a town that was filled with beautiful architecture, heritage architecture, buildings that were admirable, has now turned into what's going to be the future $1 million ghettos, like Mascot and many of the built-up areas in Sydney. I liken Newcastle to Parramatta. It's meant to be a city meant to be the second city, but it's all that it's turned out to be is a residential hub. Likewise, Newcastle, it's a residential hub for people that have got money to retire, because there's not much else to do there. Shop after shop in the main street were closed, hardly any patronage. You sort of wonder how the retailers and the food industry could actually survive. It's a beautiful town, but I think it's really a place to retire at. I know for a fact that a lot of people commute from Newcastle to Sydney for work. Likewise, as I said, as I liken it onto Parramatta and beyond, we build shopping centres, and that's our industry. What's going to happen to Newcastle? I think it's what Uppercut Adams calls the beginning of Armageddon, is what I saw. And I think it's going to get hit hard, particularly when you look at residential apartment values of $750 for 2-bedroom apartments, 1.1 million, 1.2 million, and the rental returns is less than 2%. When you take into consideration strata levies, when you take into consideration council contributions, when you take into consideration water rates, you're not going to get much for your investment. A big shout out to Bob the Builder, follower of mine that lives in Newcastle. That's not his actual name. We call him Bob the Builder because he wants to be incognito. He doesn't want to show his face. He just wants to be incognito. Bob the Builder has over 30 years experience in high-rise residential construction as well as commercial construction. And I had the opportunity to spend 4 hours with Bob. He shared some of what he's seeing in Adelaide, Melbourne, Sydney, and now in Newcastle, particularly in with regard to construction, how it's gone downhill since private certification. Some of the stuff that he shared was so alarming that even my hairs on the back of my neck stood up. One particular story that I do want to share with you is with regard to pylons, what the foundation of a building sits on. He said that he witnessed over and over again in some of the high-rise construction around Australia how builders were digging up to 15 metres into the ground, and the auger would disappear, which is basically 15 metres when you take into consideration the drill bits and everything else. And then they'd pour the concrete and then put the metal in there to give it that stability, that support, that structure. He would tell me that when they saw that mesh go in, that mesh was barely 7, 8, 10 metres long. In other words, 5, 6, 7 metres of just sheer concrete. What about when the soil moves? What about when the foundations move? What's going to happen to that, to the foundations of the building? I asked him, well, why would a developer do that? Well, said Edwin, when you can make an extra 2%, 3% or 5% on a job by skimping on materials, by getting low quality materials, by contracting low quality trades, predominantly from overseas, well, that 5% is huge when you're talking in the millions of dollars that goes in their pocket. Sadly, that is what the newly appointed commissioner is going to find out. And are they really going to find out? I don't think so. I think we're only going to find out when it's too late. In other words, when people have already bought, people that are already living in there have a lot of problems with the building, the strata levies go through the roof, and the rectification work and the money they have to come up with to maintain these buildings skyrocket. Bob the Builder showed me an app that he used on the construction site. It was rather fascinating. Although he was appointed as a supervisor, he was managing many different trades, and these trades were literally importing or bringing in overseas participants to work on the site because they couldn't find local people, so they say. But guess what? The supervisor couldn't communicate with his workers on site. So he actually found an app where he would type in a phrase, he would type in an order, an instruction, and that app would respond in Chinese in order to be able to communicate with the worker, to tell them what to do or what that had to be done. Bob the Builder was proactive in at least trying to get things done, trying to communicate. In a lot of other projects, what you have is you've got trades coming in that are limited on time, that are limited on budget, so time is of the essence. They see that work hasn't been done, but guess what? They don't call the other tradesperson to come and fix it. They just continue on with their work. In other words, it gets covered up. We have a development in Queensland that one of our followers has been posting about where this has happened over and over again, where the implementation of this process, of this form of construction, has been carried out throughout the building, and we have cover-ups of substantive issues within the building with regard to fire regulation, with regard to safety and the safety of future occupants of these buildings. And guess what, folks? That is happening right across the board. So thanks, Bob the Builder, for your commentary, for highlighting all these things to me, and for the time that you spent with me and taking me around Newey to show me what's going on there. The sales listing numbers for Sydney continue to track downward. We've gone from 22,000 from a few months ago to now 17,400. I still believe, however, that people are holding out for the warmer months. They're holding out for the mainstream media's drive of confidence to give them that motivation before they list. As I shared in my previous videos, and I talked to a number of agents and agencies across Sydney, they're all telling me, or the majority are telling me, that their clients are holding back for spring. Let's see what happens. But for now, this is our graph with regard to the listing numbers for sale across Sydney. But also keep in mind, people, that we also have very low sales numbers or sales figures by way of auction, regardless of what the percentages, regardless of what the mainstream media tell you, the numbers are very low. So all these low numbers, all these low sales numbers are happening on low sales volumes. Now, I've had some arguments with some of the followers on Twitter and some of the mainstream media pundits with regard to the fact that, according to them, when the numbers increase, property values are also going to go up. Seriously? And you call yourself an economist, or you call yourself an analyst? If that does happen, if listing numbers rise to the volumes that we had in November of last year of 26,000, and property prices also rise, I'll eat my shorts, and I'll do it live. Just saying. Once again, I hope you've enjoyed our video. And before I go, uppercut, please prepare. As I said, they like pretty boys in jail. Until next time, don't forget to follow us and share the video with your friends and family.